Welcome, Adi.
Thank you, Carlos. It's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you here because you are literally the first chief AI officer that I host.
Well, hopefully not the last, but yeah, it's great.
We'll see. This is definitely growing, and I see that you were the chief product officer at Automation Anywhere, and then this year you changed the title to chief AI officer. So maybe we can start there. Like, what does that mean?
I think one, it meant a expansion of role. I owned all of product and design as chief product officer, so owned the product strategy and all the other things. But then I took over the engineering, our infrastructure, our community, our AI teams, which are a big part of it. We've also just recently made an acquisition around customer experience and employee experience, which is a big AI company. So kind of combining that under me, so it just made sense to change the title. But the other big shift has happened the last 3 years. We've gone from what, we'll talk about in a second, but what we used to call RPA, which is robotic process automation, and we created this category about 10 years ago, to what we now call as APA, or Agentic Process Automation. Really, how do we combine traditional automation with more cognitive agents, which is a lot of AI. And so we've been, we built a bunch of new products. That's a major chunk of our go-to-market now. So there's a lot of AI that we've been building and launching in our install base and our customers for the last 3 years. So it also just made sense as a company to kind of shift our mindset from just traditional CPTO, because that was the other option, to something more relevant in this new AI world.
And I think it's a good point here, because it's not like just a cosmetic change just to be cool. I mean, you guys have been working on AI for a long time, even the name of your company, like Automation Anywhere. So tell me more about that journey and how specifically you've been applying AI.
Yeah. So for one thing is automation and AI go together. If you think about all the use cases around AI out there, a big use case is automation, right? So even before this entire generative AI, we were big on AI around, traditional AI ML models. So it's not that we're new to AI. We have a data science team, an AI ML team. It's a lot of our products around like document extraction. We're heavily using AI. Even RPA bots traditionally, there was an AI element in terms of understanding the screens and the browsers and the experiences and automating those experiences. But definitely after 2022 with ChatGPT and beyond, we've launched a bunch of new offerings, primarily around enabling customers to automate more. So automate more of the mission critical processes. So we've created this, what we call a process reasoning engine, which is an entire system of leveraging our rich metadata. So we have about 400 million processes that run through our platform. And so we're using a lot of that rich process metadata to drive very differentiated process outcomes using AI. And so as part of that, we built fine-tuned models. We have an entire system, and we partner on the foundational model side with the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, the hyperscalers, AWS, GCP are big partners of ours, as is Microsoft. So we kind of choose to use the right model for the right outcome, and we use a lot of these different models, and customers can also bring their own models. So there's a lot of AI work and data science, AI ML work, but that goes primarily to drive automation outcomes for our customers.
Yeah, I think word automation has been around forever.
Yeah.
Curious to know what type of automations you're seeing being possible now with AI and these new models that are different than the type of automations that you've been doing before.
I think we're going through a major shift. So in the past, automations were very deterministic. So you kind of have to kind of write in the rules on what exactly had to happen for that automation, for that process essentially to work. And that's essentially what RPA was, robotic process automation was, with some AI aspects of it, but really that was the prime. Now, with more and more of our customers are combining deterministic and these cognitive AI agents to automate more scenarios that they're not always set and done. Things can change. For example, if you want to do a product order, sometimes the product you're looking for is out of stock, so you need to find a replacement order, and then you need to look at a bunch of different product catalogs and compare that with the contract that you signed with the customer in a B2B scenario. So they're all variabilities. There's high variability in some of these scenarios, right? Historically, you wouldn't be able to automate those. You would need a service rep or somebody to take a look and make a decision. That's really how it worked in the past. Now, with what we call Agentic Process Automation, our customers are able to automate that process. You still have a human making the final decision, saying, yeah, this looks good, let me go for it. But a lot of that decisioning and the grunt work of figuring out the right product replacement for that specific customer is done is done by automation, done through our API process. Another example is prior authorization. So as a patient, when you go into care, you need to get through multiple levels of approval to get your care approved, right? So that you can actually pay for your care, or your insurance can pay for the care. So typically it goes from the hospital administrator to the insurance. Insurance has to have conversations with your physician, who then needs to look at actually what's covered to figure out how much do you get paid. So there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of old, both legacy systems as well as modern systems you have to look at. And so again, using in the traditional world, it is a lot of manual steps for some of these areas. And now with APA, you can automate a lot of this. Where, for example, just a very simple example, historically you had different forms for different types of let's say you wanted to go for a physician check, or you have something off with your back pain or whatever it might be. There are different forms you have to fill out for different insurance companies. Now a lot of that can be automated based on the type of care you try to go in for. Again, those things historically had to be very manual, and somebody had to fill out that form. Now it can all be automated through a combination of AI and these deterministic processes. And there are others like education and other things as well.
I want to follow on this thread, because what I'm understanding from your answers is that first of all, now that there's more awareness around AI and the possibilities to automate things, more companies are automating things, even if those automations don't require AI, which is already a win. Fine.
Yeah.
But there's also an opportunity to expand beyond what was possible. Yes. And I think that is the most exciting thing, at least to me, where yes. you can now go and do more. It's not just about doing more of the same, but faster. And I think that's also being represented in your new title, or like how companies are thinking about implementing some of these automation. So I want to go even deeper here. And like for the clients that you serve, like you guys have such a broad spectrum, right? All kinds of industries, pretty large enterprises. So how does that work? Like there's a lot of like interest. People hear the term agent, they probably automate a couple of basic things, but then they probably get stuck, and they not always find ways to connect with real business outcomes. So I want to learn more about your own experience on like going from end to end.
Yeah. So I think it's really important for us, I talk about automation anywhere and how we approach it, to really focus on what problem we're trying to solve. That's the thing we start with. We're not trying to be a general purpose agent company. Everybody's talking about agents, but from their vantage point, right? And some folks talk about it from a technology standpoint. That's pretty typical when you're early in the hype cycle. We talk about it in terms of what business outcome you're trying to drive, and what mission critical process are you trying to automate. That's kind of the lens in how we start. And so when we go to a customer, whether it's a healthcare provider or an insurance company or a bank, it's all about, what outcomes are you trying to automate, whether it's driving operational efficiency, whether it's driving compliance, or whether it's even driving new revenue streams like a loan approval and processing more loans. What are the outcomes you're trying to drive? And then let's look at how can we use APA to drive that? Because you're not trying to just use agents for the sake of agents. Like you said, it's interesting to change an existing process and add agents. Maybe there's a cool factor, but really what the bigger benefit is, can you drive a bigger outcome in those three categories I talked about: operational efficiency, compliance, or revenue, with the combination of with agents and with automation. And so we have programs like, obviously, we'll start with outcomes. We have this concept of BVP process, which is business value proposition. We go into details by department, by process, what we've seen in the industry, what we know about the customer, because typically these are high engagement customers. We are really talking about Fortune 100, Fortune 500, large enterprises, right? So we're talking about pretty large customers. And then once we kind of show them the art of the possible and figure out, here are the different outcomes you can drive for them. We also have, whether it's directly or with our partners, we have this pilot to production kind of entire strategy where we are with the customer as they deploy this. It's not like, okay, here's the product, here's the software, go figure it out. It is very much, let's work with you to help you deliver that first set of outcomes so you get comfortable. And then from there, you can scale it out, right? Because agents is new for everyone, right? And needs a little bit more, again, they are probabilistic. So it's not like if you write if else logic, it's just going to work. You're going to have to tune it based on that business data that is very unique to every customer.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. As we saw the rise of a lot of these foundational models, at some point there were so many and they were so good that started becoming more commoditized, right? The barriers of entry were much higher. So a lot of the next gen companies focused more on the application layer. It's also like faster, cheaper to make a dent there. But still, some of those applications are not always intuitive to use or require some level of customization to each client. So we're seeing now companies like Palantir talk about this model around the forward deployed engineer and deploying some of their people to make sure that the actual product is working for the client. So very curious to know from your perspective how you're thinking about it.
So we've always had, so the large enterprises are complex by their very nature. So there's always going to be some, in the past you would call it, SIs or system integrators, right? And there's always be some level of, customization, because no customer is just, point and click. We do, however, from a product, I'm first giving you the product answer. What we try to do is also build the product with, we have a low code studio environment. It's drag and drop. You don't need to know how to code. But if you know how to code, you can always write Python and use Java and others to also code it up. So it's really, we address both the citizen developer persona, the business user kind of technologist, as well as the IT developer persona from a product standpoint. Having said that, even when you're doing point and click business process, building these processes and these agents, the context of that enterprise and the company is important. So there's always some customization a large company will need. And so that's why we have both our own organization, we have for deployed engineers as well. It's a mix of traditional PS, but also engineering, because remember, a lot of the customizations required are often model customizations, so data science, right? So it has to be a mix of folks. And the benefit here, and we do it as well as we partner with, the Accentures and others in the world who also provide services, because sometimes in a customer, you might already have a partner there and it doesn't make sense for us to also be there providing the services. But either way, what that helps is, it helps the customer deploy and kind of make it very specific, make them successful with that outcome, as I mentioned. But sometimes, and actually many a time, we are learning as we are on the field, and we bring back a lot of those learnings to the product team and the engineering team so we can incorporate it into our own offering. Right? Because again, with these models, like, I'll take an example with document extraction, especially as you think about extracting, unstructured documents like contracts. Every contract is different. And for contract with suppliers, very different, can be different from different suppliers and international suppliers. So how do you kind of tweak the underlying models that we have so it becomes more easier to deploy, and then you don't need to do as much customization from a customer standpoint? Or how do you create contracts specifically for medical devices, right? We're going to learn that on an engagement with the customer in medical devices, and then bring that back so we can create something unique to other medical device customers. So those kinds of things also help us from a product standpoint.
And I think that final piece that you mentioned, the closing that feedback loop to bring some of the learnings in that implementation back to your product, is probably the difference between the traditional professional services and how you're thinking about this as a solution.
Right. That's right. It's really important as well, especially where we are in the AI cycle. I think there's a lot of learning. As much as we think that agents are AGI and all that stuff, it's really new, and the technology is evolving, frankly, every week, every month. So tools that weren't there 6 months ago are there now, And so there's a lot more opportunities to improve the experience, improve the models. But you got to do that with a customer in mind. It's the best way is when you're in these customer engagements and bring that back to the product engineering team.
I mean, 2026 is the year of enterprise AI, right? So many people at the board level are talking about AI. We need to make the investment. We need to become more agentic. We need to use AI to drive outcomes. They're kind of tired from that experimentation phase where we were all playing with different tools, but kind of not being clear on how that transfers to revenue, for example.
Yeah.
One of the limitations that I'm seeing with large enterprises is they feel like they're locked in because A, they're using an old legacy system that there's nothing you can really do with, or B, they already have this multi-year agreement with a tool like Microsoft, and then they're like, oh, but now I cannot now add anything different because we're part of this whole ecosystem. So as someone who is not Microsoft and not legacy, like how do you go into these enterprises and make sure that you can play a key role within their current stack?
I think as a process automation company, that was always part of our DNA, because you can't automate a process if you don't make it easy to connect into a customer's existing enterprise IT estate. Whether it's legacy systems, whether it's the hyperscalers like Microsoft, AWS, GCP, or even cloud-based systems, Salesforce, ServiceNow, what have you, right? Or your homegrown systems. So that has always been part of our DNA in terms of we have connectors, we have easy, point and click connections. In fact, we build our connectors using generative AI as well internally now. We don't we can build a connector in a couple of days. We used to take us a few weeks. That's an example of using AI internally to drive, productivity and faster, product cycles. But to your question, I think there are two sides of it. One is from a technology standpoint, we made it very easy to tie it in to existing IT estate. But I will say to your broader question, is there lock-in? I think at least in large enterprises I've been speaking to are pretty smart about it. They might use, let's say, a Microsoft as the primary hyperscaler. And, as you know, Microsoft, we use Microsoft, we're a strong partner. They have AI Foundry, there are different, OpenAI models, but they're also partnering with Anthropic and getting those models in. But you also find the IT departments are now, they may not go big, but they are partnering with Anthropic. They are partnering with AWS. They are doing multi-hyperscaler, kind of what we call multi-substrate or multi-vendor strategies on their end as well. And we also, another way to get around kind of lock-in is we also provide out-of-the-box models, both OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini. So we also provide that. So it's not that the IT department needs to go procure it from the hyperscalers directly. So there's multiple options there, right? There's also BYO. There's a lot of BYO happening. As much as IT wants to kind of control it, there's a lot of BYO also happening. So there are different options as far as ensuring there's no lock-in, because the broader point here is different models will be beneficial for different use cases. And so you're really getting locked in is not a great thing, because ultimately you may not be able to drive your outcome, right? One day it's OpenAI, another day it's Anthropic, and now Gemini is also is really good. So you need to have, and obviously open source models are there as well. Like some of our customers can only use open source because they don't even have access to the internet.
They don't have access to the internet?
No, they cannot open their IT estate to access the public web. So they don't even use private cloud. So that's the complexity where we're working. We have public cloud, we have private cloud, and then we have some customers who have no cloud.
Super interesting. I mean, you spent over 15 years at Salesforce as the GM for different cloud business units. So curious to know kind of how that experience is connecting to the current experience as you are also trying to navigate these new enterprise clients and play a role there.
Yeah, so Salesforce, I was there 15 years, started in 2006, started Sales Cloud, or those days SFA or Salesforce Automation, which is what Salesforce is known for. Worked in different clouds after that, and then built this product line called Community Cloud that became Experience Cloud. Essentially, our digital portfolio was built it and then became the GM for the last 4 years. It was a $1.5 billion business when I left. But more importantly, I think Salesforce is a great training ground to not only be a product leader, but also kind of grow into a general manager. And the difference is when you are just a product leader or from a product owner to a product leader to a VP of products to a general manager. The kind of scope that you go through is very different. And in many ways, I'm like a Salesforce product leader where there's a big focus on category leadership. So you want to have a category leading product. There's no question about it. There's a big focus on customer success, obviously, because, as a subscription business, you're only as good as, to make revenue, you've got to make sure the existing customers buys more. And it only happens if the customer is successful. And the third is revenue, or what we used to call ACV. So you're looking at, category leadership, making sure your customers are successful, you grow your customer base, and finally, all that drives your growth in your revenue, which helps you become a general manager. So all those kind of learnings, and obviously learning from the best at Salesforce. Many leaders are out there in the market, but you have Brett Taylor at Sierra and others. Like, there are a lot of leaders out there. Just a phenomenal leadership team that you could learn from and actually go through that entire growth cycle. Now, Salesforce went through incredible growth from 2011 to 2021 when I left. And you're learning through that growth. You're learning how a great company operates. And so those are some of the learnings, I've kind of brought to automation anyway.
I'm a founder. I started as an engineer. I had to learn product and go through all the different emotions. Sales is another critical component. And you're right. I think especially as you start trying to build this type of long-term partnerships with large enterprises, the conversations are multidimensional. Like, you need to go deep in tech, but then you're talking about partnerships with other players in the ecosystem. You're talking about the go-to-market motion, or like setting them up for success so they can also be doing their own things when you are not in the room. And like, that's why I see that these type of platforms that become harder to sell, because ultimately you can't just go there with salespeople only. You need to bring the type of, like what you're talking about, like you as a product expert that also happens to understand how to sell.
Yes. It's this is old days, right? So back in 2006 or maybe 2007, I was just a junior PM and, understanding what being a product manager is. My manager at that point, he made me actually sit on the sales floor and first listen to how sales reps were cold calling, like prospects, and talking about the offering. And then he made me do a couple of cold calls myself. And that was like a learning by doing, because as a product leader or product manager, you hardly ever pick up the phone and call and explain your product to a prospect. You're really after, that's a sales rep's job. So those kinds of experiences kind of are great experiences because it forces you to focus on, what are you driving for the customer? How do you speak the customer's language? What do you build that will help drive those outcomes that are important to that customer? And what do you focus? Because there's so many things you can do. How do you focus? And then as you're building and revving on the product, it's not only good enough to actually launch your offering, but you also need to make it good. There's a very big difference between MVP and true GA and a mature offering that is kind of, running on its own, like from a revenue standpoint. So how do you go through that cycle? And you have to do that by really listening to your customers, being out there and helping in many ways, at least in enterprise sales, working with the sales team to help sell the product. Because there's a lot of credibility when a product leader is out there explaining the value, explaining what other customers are doing. And in fact, in some cases, even demoing live the customer scenario. Those are things that I think every product leader should be able to do.
I'm thinking about the different motions here. I mean, obviously, the headline of your company says enterprise AI agents for every business process. When I hear words like every, I get scared because sometimes you go too broad, then it's hard to understand really how deep you can go across different categories. So I would love to learn more about that entry point. When you are starting to work with a large enterprise that already has different technologies, like how can you create that type of MVP to show value fast enough, so then you have the right to expand from within?
Our strategy is seed and grow. It's kind of you land and expand. Sorry, that's kind of a better term. So we start typically in the CFO's office. That's typically where operational effectiveness, whether it's cost savings, cash flow, actual dollars. Those are the kinds of processes that you want to first automate, right? AP, accounts receivable, accounts payable, supply chain contracts. Those are the kinds of things we first start with, land. We show the ROI. Typically customers can roll out anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, which is a pretty quick ROI. We're not talking about months and months of trying something. So within 3 to 6 months, you're really already showing the ROI. So that's the land. And typically it's a CFO's office because that's where a lot of the operational aspects of it. In some industries like manufacturing, it might also be the chief operating officer. They may have specific operational functions. So it's very much an operations piece of it. Revenue cycle is another one in healthcare. Then you start expanding. And typically the expansion is more of the same department. And often it is now going to multiple departments. So you're going from maybe the CFO to the chief operating officer into core supply chain operations, manufacturing operations. You go into customer support because again, you have, that's a great area to automate some of the aspects of the customer experience. Think about the product recall scenario or product replacement scenario I highlighted. And so the broader thing is you don't go broad. You start with an area that you can drive tangible outcomes. And for us as CFO, and then you go expand out to different departments.
I resonate with that because even though we are smaller than Automation Anywhere, it always starts with someone who has to champion this thing. In our case, the chief product officer, but I agree, like ultimately someone who is in touch with revenue and cost. You can show that real value soon, and then you expand from there. I mean, one of the challenges that I can see as you keep expanding and you deploy more agents, more automations, is that when someone has to orchestrate all of that and monitor the maintenance of these new things. So how do you go about it?
So as a process automation company, we have very deep monitoring, real-time monitoring, process observability, all the tools that an IT admin needs to actually monitor what's happening with their systems. And the ROI. So it's not like, just making up ROI. It's also tracking what processes are running, what dollars are flowing and what's the ROI around it. So we have the full. It's not only about the process and the agents of building, it's the deployment and it's the monitoring and ROI. We provide that all. But to your broader point, I think it's really important. So typically most of our customers have what we call a center of excellence or COE. And they are the ones who manage it centrally. And some customers have centralized, some customers have hub and spoke models because it's multi-department and they're large enterprises. So different models, but essentially you need to have a broader view, a consolidated view of the impact, whether it's one department or multiple departments. Our job obviously is to provide the best practices and the technology, but we do that with a center of excellence who does that for the company.
Because it sounds like very strategic function. Like this ultimately is very strategic, right? You have like whoever is monitoring the performance of the agents has a lot of influence over the ultimate performance of the company. And in my mind, I'm biased, but I always default to the product people because they understand, or they should understand, business, tech, and the customer. So when you talk about these centers of excellence, who are the people who are really overseeing this type of process automations?
So in the past, when it first started, it was again typically in finance, because that's where a lot of these operational effectiveness kind of projects we would start, because there's cash flowing. I mean, finance ultimately is responsible for cash and bookings and numbers to the market. But more and more, we're seeing this group within central IT, because central IT is now responsible to drive the AI strategy and kind of the automation strategy for the entire company. And so some companies will still see it in finance. That's where the spoke models are, but then the hub will be in central IT. We're also more and more finding that you'll have so you'll have a centralized center of excellence, but then you'll also have department specific. So you have something in marketing, you have something in support, you have something in finance, you have something even in operations. So again, you want to give the freedom the departments also to move fast. Because one of the things we've all learned with agents and AI broadly is this market is moving so fast that it's not good enough to just have a one central team understand and learn. You need all your employees to understand, learn, build, and use. Like independent automation, all of us use ChatGPT or Gemini or some other product. And that's the same with automation. You want to democratize the ability for, employees within different departments to kind of learn and use, because everybody should be able to build an agent. It shouldn't only be a few people.
Conceptually, I agree with you. And I think that works very well in a smaller environment where everybody is pretty tech savvy and high energy and it's a high level of trust. But I'm just worried about like this being a larger environment. I hear you talk about IT.
Yeah.
IT professionals, like how strategic are they? How tech savvy are they to really make sure that those agents are going to make the most for the business?
I see all these projects that we drive, it's a business and IT partnership. Just IT on its own is not going to be defining outcomes. It has to be you can look at any project, any customer. Success is only when you have a business buyer, business owner, and IT. If you just have IT and you're trying to sell technology, I don't think it's going to be successful because you don't have an outcome that you're going after, right? So that's one. It's always a combination of the two. I think the second is to your broader question: how experienced or savvy are they with using AI and understanding kind of how to think? It depends, right? So in some industries, like I think I'd say financial services and some kind of more forward leaning, where they have to be at the cutting edge of technology, they are pretty good. I mean, they have some very good talent that they are in the whether they're using open source or whether they're using automation anywhere, others they're using a lot of these. And we also have the Pathfinder community where just recently we ran hands-on sessions. So we had nearly 8,000 odd folks join virtually and building agentic processes, right? So they are actually building, and you have a mix of traditional developers, AI developers, and even some line of business technologists. So you can have a mix of people. But having said that, I think some industries obviously they don't have that necessarily all that talent, and that's where we can help initially. We also look at our partners, our GSI partners, to kind of provide in some of that talent. But that's why I think we are still in the early adopter phase, to be frank, right? It's not like it's mass adoption, especially in agentic processes, and that all that goes to do with how savvy and how quickly our customers can learn some of these new technology. But we're actively helping them on that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I want to discuss with you. Obviously, like people who are top performers at the cutting edge, they're excited about using this to their own advantage. But not everybody's in that position, right? A lot of people still see this as, oh my God, it's going to remove me from the company. So sometimes expecting that an IT professional or a customer support professional is going to deploy this type of agents to remove themselves from the job is just not realistic. So I'm just curious to know, like, how do you find ways to encourage this type of adoption in a way that brings everybody along?
So I think there's no better way by doing, right? There's a theory of what agents do, and then there's actually building and doing. Whether it's building or whether using, not everybody needs to build. Some people can just use. So like I said, to the Pathfinder community and other ways, and including with the hyperscaler partners like AWS and GCP, we do a lot of kind of hands-on sessions with our customers, prospects. Like as a prospect, you don't need to buy. You can just be in these hands-on sessions and see what it feels like and what can you do with it, right? And we open it up to anyone. You don't have to be a technologist. In fact, half the folks who join are not technologists. They're business people who are joining and trying to build. Because that's again goes to the low code aspects of it. You don't need to know how to code to build these. But the mindset shift, I think, again, you got to talk about, going back to one of your earlier questions, what outcomes are you driving? So, for example, in like healthcare, One of the use cases we kind of, so if you think about healthcare providers, you want nurses to spend more time with patients. You don't want them to be spending time uh, printing out or doing a customer summary or doing a prior authorization check on a patient, right? You want them if you're a patient, you want a nurse there and kind of asking you how you're feeling and helping you. Well, we all know there are not enough nurses out there. So how do you kind of get rid of all that operational overhead that they have to do today, so they can spend more time with the patient? So that's an example where it aligns with the outcomes of these nurse practitioners, because they do want to spend more time with the patient, right? And so that's where AI is great. There'll be other scenarios where I think it's going to take a little bit more time, but having said all that, I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we don't all. I think I would say our customers understand this. It's a question of time. You have to be AI literate. You have to be able to use these tools, and you have to. And while some jobs will change and how we do those jobs, the job expansion will also happen, right? Like my job expansion happened. I was a CPO and I'm a chief AI development officer. Right? That expansion happened. And I think that'll be true also of a nurse practitioner, of a support rep. I mean, when I was a Salesforce, the entire hope of a support rep was not only are they providing support, but they're also a sales channel. Because what's the best time you can think about upselling a customer is when you're providing good support. A customer is more likely to buy the next level because they're happy with the offer, with the services that they just got. So how do evolve a support rep to be not only support but also be a sales channel? That can only happen if you can use AI tools that a lot of the operational grunt work is done on their behalf.
So if we were to optimize for success, let's say we're getting together a year from now, most of your large enterprise clients already adopted this technology. They are running some new automations, and to the example of your nurses, they're already being able to serve more clients and be more effective just because they have this agentic support. What would be next?
I think we are just, to be frank, we again like very early in the APA or kind of broader agentic space, right? So I think a year from now, if you have, let's say, 500 customers who deploy the first set of use cases and seen those first outcomes that are driving business impact, that would be a huge win. Aligned to that, we have more and more of our customers learning what is an agent, because also the definition of agent is pretty broad. What is an agent, and more importantly, how does it help them in their day-to-day work in whatever capacity they are with their business? My sense is that it's going to be maybe 5% of what a company actually does. There's the entire, if you want to get to 40-50% productivity, operational effectiveness, new revenue streams, there's so much more that can be done with AI that, frankly, it's going to take more than a year to get there. And some industries, like I said, will be faster, like financial services, and some will be slower. So I think it'll also be dependent on industry and company. So it'll take more time than a year. But I think from a pure outcome standpoint, I'd say take next 3 to 5 years. I think this is a decade of agents in AI. It's not a year of agents in AI. And I think it'll take 4 or 5 years for this to be mass market, just like mobile and SaaS or cloud computing was mass market, but it took some time. I think we're probably at least 4 to 5 years for it to be mass market. And that in time, the technology is already evolving super fast. Things like agentic orchestration, agents just figuring out what the right next action is. All those things will evolve from a technology standpoint.
Adi, it's been a pleasure to geek out with you on product, learn more about how you're automating so many processes with and without AI. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Carlos. Really appreciate it.